Thank you, everybody, for joining today. My name is Gary Weber. I'm the founder and CEO of AccuPoint Solutions. Today, we're going to be speaking on the topic of data. Data is being positioned as the answer to growing a book of business. But what does it really mean? And is it easier said than done? And joining me today are our panelists, Nathan Jacobson, who is the Executive Vice President of Simplicity Group, Lisa Todd, who is Head of Life and Disability Insurance Distribution at Mass Mutual Strategic Distributors, and Mark Verbos, the Executive Vice President at Aimcore Group. So thank you all for joining today. Lisa, we're going to start with you, if you don't mind. Sure. Let's kind of start at the beginning. So do you believe that data is the answer to growth for your firm? And if so, why? And if you don't, where does it play a role and how important is it for you?
Yeah, thank you so much, Gary. I do believe that data is the answer for us. And the reason I say that is because data is the foundation on how this new channel was established at Mass Mutual. We looked at industry data to see what was being sold and by whom. And because of that, this channel came into formation. So when we think about that today, we're utilizing data to manage our business on a day-to-day basis, but also inform all of the decisions about how we want to grow and where we choose to take our new channel. So we've leveraged data a lot in the last 16 months. And where we've really sort of focused that is in some of the prioritization work that we have to do. Given our infancy, there's a lot of work to do. We can't get it all done, given everything that's changing in the environment and in the industry today. So what we've done is we've leveraged and looked at data to try to identify the impact of all of our competing priorities and what the expected outcome is, and to take a look at, is that outcome something that benefits our distribution partners as well as our strategic goals? For example, is there a technology implementation that we need to prioritize to create a better distributor experience, thus, enhancing their service levels and their NPS scores and so on? And we're going to use that data in that way to be able to try to drive our decision making. We're trying to help our distribution partners meet their goals as well as support our own.
Okay, so data is important to you in your channel. How about to your company overall? Does it take place as the #1 view as well, or because obviously you're focused in on it?
Yes, everything that we are doing, it's one of our core principles, is that we will be a data-driven organization. And to that point, the company as a whole has established quite a few various data science centers with various partnerships with various universities across the Northeast.
Okay. And Mark, I'm going to ask you a question. It kind of fits in a little bit with kind of the timeline that Lisa just mentioned. But sure, in your mind, what makes data more important today than it was, let's say, I say 10 or 15 years ago, but even 5 years ago? Or in your mind, has the importance stayed the same?
Yeah, Gary, thanks. First off, thanks for having us. It's always a pleasure to see everybody, even if it's virtual. But, I don't know that I would say that data is more important today than it was 10 or 15 years ago. I think it's just as important. It's not like it wasn't important 10 or 15 years ago. That being said, though, I think analytics have come a really long way in a pretty short period of time. And because of it, now we can use data to aid in multiple aspects of operations, sales, and it can be a game changer for businesses. That being said, to get maximum results, companies need to know how to properly utilize the technology and improve the quality of the data. And I think that's where we've seen a big shift over the last 10 or 15 years, is that the quality, the accuracy of the information that we have is no longer as reliant upon the user inputting the information into the system. And so while I don't think it's become more important, it's become more usable, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. And Nathan, just kind of back to the original question that we had, is data the answer to growth as well for you?
Yeah, and echo Mark, Gary, glad to be here. Thanks for having us on. I don't necessarily know that data is the answer to growing our business. It's certainly one of the important ones. Relationships for our business are still very much key. However, our business, and I'd say all businesses exist to solve problems. And we really believe that data is extremely important to understanding the problems that our customers face. And I think that applies to both the advisor, and at the consumer level. There's just so much data out there that we're collecting via our marketing efforts and obviously available via third-party data sources that just help us communicate effectively with our customer. And, combined with our marketing data, I mean, that third-party data can really be extremely powerful. So I'd say it helps us profile our client to really understand who they are and the challenges they face. And I think that's really where the data is most important.
Okay. And just to stick with you, Nathan, on this. So if you can, without giving away any secrets, what are the top 1 or 2 initiatives that you're working on today with data? You mentioned profiling the client, but are there others? Is it direct sales or marketing or analytics or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, we're really heavily focused on using data in our marketing and recruiting efforts. We're engaged in a lot of digital marketing efforts, which really provides real-time data feedback to us on the effectiveness of the marketing efforts that we're conducting. And we really try to follow the agent and sometimes the consumer through the customer journey, because it can help us provide extremely important data for our recruiting efforts. Analytics are obviously key, Gary. Using the data that we gather, and without analytics, the data is just not that helpful to us. One of the things that we just recently kind of set out on is building out an analytics team to really measure the effectiveness of our sales and marketing efforts.
Okay, great. And if you would, just to add on to what you're talking about, I know each and every day I talk to people about digital marketing. It seems to mean something different to everybody. How do you define digital marketing?
I mean, there are a lot of applications, Gary. I think the most relevant today is social media. LinkedIn, Facebook. I think there's still so much more power in those platforms than we're effectively tapping into today.
Okay, great.
So does Elon Musk.
We'll see if that deal goes through.
Right, exactly.
And Mark, since you raised your hand, I'll go to you next. What one initiative are you involved with that might be different from Nathan's? And are there others, I guess more as important to this question, are there others that you'd like to institute, but you haven't? And what would be the reason you haven't?
Yeah, I think, we're doing a lot of the same things with data and with digital marketing, like Nathan just covered. One of the other things that we use or rely on data for is carrier analytics and insights. And so what we've done basically is we've taken the real-time information and data and put it into Power BI dashboard that allows our marketers, our case designers, the folks on the front end, on that illustration side of things, to really formulate recommendations and manage producer expectations before the app's taken, whether it be cycle times, placement ratios, placement or approvals as applied for. We're doing a lot with that information because we all talk about this, right? Sometimes price or the lowest priced isn't necessarily the best option to go with. And so how can we formulate our recommendations, one, that consider more than just price in the recommendation, but two, also enhance the value of calling, one of our AIM core offices to get a recommendation or get support if you're a producer over maybe somebody else that you would call. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the big things we're focused on. In terms of something we'd like to do or get better at doing, we're doing a lot on the in-force marketing side as well, or in-force policy management side. We'd like to, and I like to see us get better at getting that information, both from our internal AMS systems as well as from carriers, and getting more a standardized approach to how we take and aggregate that information to formulate, actionable next steps and follow up, to Nathan's point, to kind of follow the client through their journey the whole way past policy issuance and into the various life stages that they'll go through over the next 15, 20, 30 years.
With the end goal of being with them the whole step of the way with product wise.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. We talked a little bit too about analytics, and it kind of leads to the next question. And Lisa, I'm going to ask you this one.
Sure.
What experience do you look for in those at your firm that work with the data? So the people actually analyzing it, working with it, are they hard to train and find? And how does that experience, have you found, help you, either the lack of or an abundance of?
So I talked to several of my peers who have been doing most of the hiring over the last 16 months, because we have hired quite a few analysts to specifically to handle our data requests. And the number one response that I got back was that we are looking for people with curiosity. And so when I probed a little bit deeper, and as we were talking, and I thought about my experiences in working with our data analyst group, it's the individuals with curiosity that are willing to ask us questions as business owners about what are the key drivers of our business. And they will continue to ask questions, and they will question, well, why is it done that way? And it's in an effort to try to identify and drive to some of those key elements and key metrics that we're trying to zero in on. I have found that the individuals that are incredibly curious and have sort of no fear of failure, and are interested in seeing if they can figure out if the path that they're down is going to give a positive outcome, or an outcome that will be useful. I think it's that sort of combination that's most effective. We've got lots of discussions with individuals who really didn't have any business acumen, and over the last 16 months have developed quite a bit of acumen, to the point where they're enhancing propensity models based on the conversations that they hear us as sales leaders having every day, without having to have sort of side conversations. It's pretty remarkable how advanced the folks have come in a very short period of time.
And is there, curiosity is great. Is there a particular background that you find is better? You mentioned business acumen. Is it, do they have to have been in this industry at all, or is that curiosity override everything?
Curiosity overrides anything. The individuals that we have hired into our team over the last 16 months had zero business acumen. Okay.
We're going to have to come up with a word, because as you're saying that, what we say over here is that you need to have a passion for the data, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same.
Yeah.
So somewhere in there is a combination of those two words that we'll have to come up with, passionurity or something that says what people want. Nathan, anything else that you would add to that? Are you also hiring people purely for analytics, and what is their profile?
We are, yeah. As Gary, I mentioned, we're building out a team as we speak. We've got some jobs posted right now related to this. And Lisa, I love the curiosity description. I mean, I think in terms of specific skills, Gary, I mean, I think it's powerful to have people who have background in the digital space. Like I said, social media, the other applications there. But I think looping back to what Lisa said, just people who are willing to not just take the data at the surface level, but dig a couple layers deeper and see where it's applicable to our business, I think is, a couple of the main qualities that we're looking for in that role.
Great. Mark, are you doing anything on your end as far as profiling or anything? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we're not doing much different than what's already been mentioned. One of the biggest qualities that I look for is somebody that wants to know more, wants to know why, right? We've got a person on our corporate team that we brought in 3 years ago. He handles our integrations and large scale project management. Didn't know anything about the life insurance business. came from completely outside the space. And, you know, I think that's important because one, they come in with a fresh viewpoint, right? They've seen other industries and what work in other industries, and they can bring that into our space. And they can apply it to our data. I mean, look, let's be real. We haven't been the best industry at utilizing our data, right? So if we can find folks from outside of our industry to come in and teach us how they've effectively done it in other spaces, that's really, really valuable. And what I liked about that individual is not only did they come in without any preconceived notion of how we should do things, but they also came in with a curiosity as to why we do things the way we do them and if we can do them better. And I think that's important. You don't get that from somebody that doesn't have that curiosity or that desire to learn and expand their knowledge and put the data or reasoning behind the data to understand it.
Right. All right. Well, we all seem to be in agreement there. That's great. So we're talking about analytics. We're talking about data. We're talking about lots of things here. Mark, what's the one metric you rely on the most to measure the effectiveness, right? So we've got the people and they're growing and they're learning. We're using the data for different things, but what are those metrics and what are they telling you today?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the metrics that I look at from a day-to-day basis, you know, overseeing our business development, our distribution side of things is the opportunities, right? The opportunities and the conversion rate, those opportunities to apps to paid business, obviously, to commissions. And so we've created, I say we loosely because I am terrible at creating Power BI dashboards, but we've got some people who are really, really good at it that have created an opportunities dashboard. And that's one of the things I look at every day. We've, you know, just by way of the structure of our organization and AIMCorps having, you know, been comprised of 40 independently owned BGAs, member firms, as we call them, you know, they're on various different AMS systems. And we don't have the capability necessarily to direct or influence which AMS system they're on. What we've been able to do, though, is take the data from the respective AMS systems, pull it into a standardized system or environment like Power BI, and recognize the conversion rates, see who's doing well, see who may be struggling, get them paired together so that they can learn from one another. We can do best practice sharing and really enhance everybody's opportunity and effectiveness.
And Lisa, it's having probably one of the newer divisions from what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
How about you? How are you looking at the metrics? And I think, have those metrics then enabled you to either look at other data points or particular data points more closely and maybe even throw some out?
Sure. So when we think about some of those data points and some of the metrics that we're looking at, one of the things that I think has been really interesting on this experience the last 16 months is one of the first things that we establish is what are sort of the metrics going to be. So if we're going to be doing a webinar or a series of educational sessions, or if we're going to be doing a social media campaign, the first thing that we do is we will meet with, you know, if it's a social media campaign, we'll meet with the marketing group and we will sit down and have a conversation about what are going to be sort of the success metrics that we use and what's the frequency going to be and how will we be able to leverage that and evaluate the effectiveness of that campaign. Same thing from a webinar, from an educational session that we're doing. It's important to sort of identify those before so that you can then, you know, structure and tailor your messaging or the work that you're going to do and be able to model out and to determine whether or not you've been successful in trying to identify having the impact that you had modeled.
Is there anything that's ever surprised you? So in other words, you went into a campaign and thought, I think this is going to be fantastic. And then the data told you something else.
Not yet. A really interesting example is something that just happened over the last couple of months. We've started a new social media series with a particular individual. And what we're finding is that one individual in particular will create an open rate on a social media campaign of more than 200% better than the industry benchmark.
Okay.
So it's finding the right person and the right message, and people will pay attention to it.
Right. Right. Okay. Now, I'm going to follow up with another question with you, Lisa. How important is your current data, right? So we've talked a little bit, we've touched on there's some outside data, and then there's some proprietary data that you have.
Yep.
Clients or prospects that are just high up on your list. How important is that to your retention efforts, and how do you kind of combine that with third-party data?
Yeah, so the internal data in our data warehouses are sort of at the core of what we're doing versus some of the purchase data. And when we think about that, we're looking for ways in which we can leverage our internal data. To Mark's point earlier, is how can we create opportunity for our distribution partners? So one of the things that we are in the process of refining is a propensity to buy model. So as we look at not only our own data, but some of our distributors' data, if they're willing to share, can we look at the various data points from a life insurance sale, and can we potentially identify an individual's propensity to potentially purchase a disability product? That's offering an opportunity to some of our distributors that they might not have had before. Right. So there's lots of really interesting things that we're trying to find ways to leverage some of that data in different ways, bringing value.
Okay. And Mark, do you view internal data as equal in terms of how it helps you execute your plans? Or are you viewing it more important than external, or not?
I'd say it's evolved over the last, I don't know, 3-4 years. So if you would have asked me this question 4 years ago, I would have told you I don't have the same level of confidence in our internal data as I would from an outside data source. And the reason for that is that data is information, and information is only as good as the accuracy of it, right? And so going back to a couple comments I've made over the course of the last few minutes, we have 40 agencies putting data manually into AMS systems, and those AMS systems differ between each individual agency, and not just differ because they might use agency integrator instead of smart office, but even the way that they put the information in the system or the fields that they require inside of their internal offices is vastly different from one another. And so over the last 3-4 years, and as we've gotten more and more engaged and our institutional business has grown to become more meaningful, we've had to find ways to standardize data input. And so what we did is we created a system that basically all of the data input has to be the same. It's all standardized. So for our institutional business now, today, I would say that, the confidence in our data is higher than that of an external source or data provider. And so we're utilizing that information more and more frequently to provide those real-time analytics, insights into the carrier cycle times, propensities to buy in the future with the enforced data, and marrying that all together. But it's definitely changed for us over the last few years.
What's the penalty for not inputting the data correctly? Just doesn't.
We don't really have a penalty. We leave that up to the institution. They figure it out pretty quickly, and then their compliance department comes down on us.
Right. Okay. Nathan, this is a question for you. Where do the metrics become softer, and how do you overcome those? So, for example, you hear people using data to go to conferences or to do some of these social media campaigns, but can you really measure them? And if you can't, how do you overcome that, or do you just not use those campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, Gary. I mean, I think I circle back to what I mentioned earlier, just the overall customer journey. And what I mean by that is, like we're tracking everything that we do with our marketing efforts. I mean, what are advisors and consumers responding to? What events are they attending? And why? Where are we not getting good attendance. Where are they falling off in the sales funnel? Are we getting our reps contracting with us? If they're not, why not? You know, digging deep. And it goes back, you know, kind of tagging on to what Mark said, accurately documenting everything. You know, we utilize Salesforce within Simplicity Group, so that's the primary hub for you know, our data collection. And what I'd say is, you know, how do we overcome that? It loops back to, you know, again, digging into the analytics, you know, and so just diligently following every step of the path, and you know, hoping that it's going to provide us the right answers to continue driving the business forward.
Okay. Mark, this is a question for you. If data is so important, what would you do to make it even more effective? So in other words, you know, in another way, what are your challenges today? And are there plans to kind of corral that, make it even more effective?
Well, we'll definitely think of better penalties for not inputting the data. No, I'm just kidding. You know, I think, you know, what makes it more effective is having data quality standards, period. You've heard it from all of us through pretty much every answer to the questions today, which is, you know, we have to have confidence in the data. And if there's confidence in the data, then we can really use our entire imagination as to what we can do with it. Whether it's propensities to buy, whether it's just, you know, I mean, one of the things that we've recently done is like a win back campaign, looking at information from 3-4 years ago and producers that haven't written a piece of business since, and formulating a campaign and you know, messaging to get them to consider writing business with our offices again. But without those quality standards, I mean, you can see where, you know, not only do you lose confidence quickly, but where it could really go sideways if you're sending the wrong message to the wrong person based on wrong information. And so I think, you know, while there's certainly not a lack of information out there, the quality of data still leaves a little bit to be desired. And while we've gotten better, we can get even better. You know, a study that I found interesting from Harvard Business Review looked at a data set and assessed quality of data at 3% as acceptable. So 97% of the data information that they looked at in this study was unacceptable and had inaccuracies. We got to get better at it. Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways we can do it. Standardization and having those quality standards are probably a good start.
All right. And for the last question, I'm going to ask each of you just to answer this one. What is the single most important trait related to the use of your data? And we've heard a lot of things here, and this is kind of sum them up. And you've said them at some point during this conversation, but you know, rather than me sum them up, it would be great to kind of hear you sum up what you think that trait is. Is it the people? Is it the data confidence? What is it exactly? So Nathan, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. No, it may sound pretty simple, Gary. What I wrote down related to that question is that the data needs to be accurate, or as accurate as possible, you know, alluding to what Mark said, just the quality and applicable to whatever the campaign was. So, and what I mean by that is, you know, we're trusting this data to make decisions around driving our business forward and delivering value to our consumers. So at all points possible, it needs to be high quality, accurate data that we're trusting to make decisions. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, Lisa.
I'm just going to echo what Nathan and Mark both have said. I think that you have to start with the quality of the data. I think that is imperative. I think personally, the sort of secondary sort of aspect of this is, I think you got to lean into it, right? So all of us are, you know, experienced individuals, and, you know, we've got experiences, and I think sometimes we're like, oh, well, that's what the data says, but does it really? And I think we allow ourselves to say, hey, is it really the quality of the data? And maybe that's not where it needs to be. I think that if you've got confidence in the quality of your data, you have to lean into it and go, okay, maybe my experiences, my anecdotal information is not the answer.
All right, thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nathan and Lisa have said, pretty much everything. The only thing I would add to it is, once you have the quality and confidence in the data, in order to lean into it, I think you've got to be able to take the data and put it into an environment and a dashboard or some sort of visualization tool that allows that data to be easily accessed and you to be able to make quick assessments on the fly. And so it's got to be in the right environment to be able to make and drive conclusions and take action. And whether that's Power BI, Tableau, there's a million different Zoho, million different tools out there. Finding the tool and then making sure that your people are trained on how to use that tool is really important.
All right, good. So that concludes this discussion today. I think what we've heard, and thank you for the summations, is that data is the answer. It's not necessarily something that's being positioned today. It's been positioned for quite a long time, but we're getting better at it. We're looking at analytics. We're looking at the metrics after the fact and just getting better and better at it. So thank you all for your time. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for everybody listening and have a great rest of your day.